as well as to highlight methods by which we, concerned citizens, can get involved and make an impact. So the scholars and representatives that you're going to hear from in a little bit are at the forefront of this movement in the state of Connecticut. And they've spent countless hours working to improve animal welfare throughout the Northeast. So at the Pequot Library, this is an issue and topic very close to our hearts. Since the early days of the library's founding in 1894, our special collections have centered around ornithology and animal crypts. Right now, it's a small part of our collection, but it's a very, very vibrant component. So some of these items include portfolios by John Gould and Daniel G. Elliott, as well as the Vienna edition of John James Audubon's Birds of America. So this is the rare edition of Audubon's piece. And after the program, please feel free to go to our reading room and check that out. The last page was turned today, and you'll be able to check this out. So the town of Fairfield is intimately tied to the evolution of bird conservation in this country. In 1896, town resident and philanthropist Mabel Osgood Wright found a birdcraft museum which you can visit today. I think they're renovating a little bit, so it's going to take a little time. But she also helped to form the Connecticut Audubon Society as well as the National Audubon Society. So through the testimony and research we will soon hear about, it is abundantly clear that her spirit and passion remain to this very day. Without further ado, I'd like to now introduce tonight's speakers and panelists. So we have Viveca Morris, who worked as a research scholar at Yale University and as the executive director of the Law, Ethics, and Animals program at Yale Law School. She leads the Yale Bird Friendly Building Initiative, to accelerate the development and adoption of bird-friendly building design on Yale's campus and beyond. Leo Smith is the Northeast Regional Director for Connecticut Dark Skies Association and the International Dark Skies Association Connecticut Chapter Country, and he served 8 years as a member of the board of directors for Connecticut Dark Skies and has received numerous awards throughout the state for his work in conservation. In 2006, he received the Illuminating Engineer Society President Award for his participation as a member of the IGA-IES Model Outdoor Lighting Ordinance Task Force. I'm surprised I could say that. As serves as co-chair of Lights Out Connecticut, and is the president, and served as the president of the New Haven Bird Club, and as chair of the Connecticut Ornithological Association. Meredith Barges is the co-chair of Lights Out Connecticut and student policy researcher at Yale Law School. He aims to make our city and town safer for migratory birds. In 2021, she convinced Yale Divinity School to join Lights Out. And on most weekends, you can find her birding at East Rock Park in New Haven or at the Yale Divinity Farm tending milkweed, coneflower, and cosmos for the holidays. So thank you all again for coming, and I'm going to turn things over to Craig. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, guys. So we're switching mics.
Wonderful. Wow, nice crowd. If this starts to get feedback, I'll just shut it off and project. Well, I really am glad and honored to be able to come here and launch this program. Feedback.
Yeah, sure.
So this is a group of organizations in this area that's including the Colony of Pathways, International Dark Skies, Connecticut Audubon, and Aspen Land Trust. So we are dedicated to the nice spot and I'm more than calling ourselves the next kind of neighbors. So like the state, I'm going to raise, but there should be some more programs that are Pequot and some other demonstrations throughout the so if there's not a problem, I want to create a dark sky for you. So when was the last time that you were in the dark? I mean, total dark. When was the last time you stood out at night and looked up and you see clouds, you see light pollution, and you see any stars? So I'm in contemplation right now, like Orion and Taurus are prominent. Trail back to sunset. The dragon snakes around the bears, the popstar cereal, right on the island of planets. Even off our lab, the sleep, and children close together. What are the days of the month? Oh, yeah, it's full. Well, probably the sugar one because the staff, it's running this time of year. So you see, I'm using apps, I'm using the internet together. Old days, people just went outside and looked up. But as humans in the modern world, we go nights, weeks, months, and years without noticing the night sky. Our birds don't have this luxury. They have to migrate at night. Ornithologists continue to try to understand how birds navigate during migration. They evolved millions of years ago to navigate at night in the dark world. They use stars and the Earth's magnetic field and the light of the moon. As humans, we have to have technology in order to start understanding how they move. This is on the radar. What happens is when a flock of birds start to rise from their resting areas during migration, they appear first at the dot, then they expand out to be a cloud that could cover an entire part of the continent. This is a much more enhanced technology. This is put out by ornithologists called Repasz. At school, we're able to predict how many birds are going to be flying over Connecticut during migration. You just turn into Repasz, pick your location, and it gives you this information. So in Connecticut, because we're such an important point on the map for this migration in this continent, in this hemisphere, we could have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 birds that move overhead especially during the fall migration. We can experience this migration. You're going to get early technology as the birds eclipse the moon. Sometimes we get overhead, single birds or a flock. Here we go. We have built our cities and our civilization under these ancient migratory routes. So their nighttime migration is colliding with a human artificial day. Well, because I am coming from the scale away, the Connecticut Ornithological Association, I am bird brain. So I have this to show us some other creatures that are affected by our night pollution, by our light pollution. There are many more nocturnal species that have an evolutionary story to tell. They depend on the dark. Leo Smith can discuss some of these species about salmon. So humans, we evolved from the light. You know, we did not like the dark because in those caves, that's where the saber-toothed tigers and cave bears were. So we did whatever possible to take back the night. So in 1807, gas street lamps were first introduced. We have continued trying to light up our skies. We have been using so we have used going from gas street lamps to incandescent to halogens, and now these very, very bright LEDs, which seem to be the heart of the problem. And the bird have paid a price. But brighter does not mean safer. There's no clear scientific evidence that shows that our outdoor lighting deters crime. There was a study that was done in 2015, a study published in the Journal of Epidemiology Community Health. They were looking at 62 municipalities in England and Wales. No matter what they did, shut the lights off, kept some of them on, did them here, did them there, no difference. But stats do show that a lot of crime happens during the day, and a lot of crime happens because we have lit up the work area for the criminals. Also, maybe later we could also talk about the effect of glare and how that makes us more dangerous as we drive, and criminals can actually hide in the glare. Recognize this place? So, unfortunately, our night sky is so lit up that you could actually see Long Island Sound in Cape May, which is a mecca for birders, lit up because of this night sky. This is New York. This is the 95 corridor, 91 corridor. What's important to point out is each one of these points is a decision that has been made by an individual, has been made by a company, has been made by a town, that they need these bright lights. So, our panelists will also discuss how do we actually change people's perception of the need for this light. How many people here have actually seen the Milky Way? How many people saw it last summer? Okay, a few people must have. Most of us living in the 95 corridor, excuse me, will see like the inner city, the suburban area. Unfortunately, very few of us see the excellent dark sky side. There is a place in Maine that's literally able to touch. A lot of places are meant it's a method for astronomers. So we do see a few stars here along the 95 corridor. But keep in mind, these stars, some of this light was generated millions of years ago when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And it's just getting to us. So because of light pollution, we're actually losing this hope of the universe. We just don't experience it. Thank you, night. Okay, back to birds. I'm sorry about this cord. It's like I'm really afraid to touch anything. We're going to lose activity. During migration, we have 4 billion birds that come from Canada into the United States. They will nest along the boreal forest up here. They come into the United States. Some will actually winter over in the southern states. And then they're also joined by billions of birds coming from the United States, going down into South America and Central America and into the Caribbean. But you see what happens on the return flight. We have 3.5 billion birds coming back into the United States, 2.6 billion birds going back into Canada. Where are those birds going? We are losing them under wintering habitat in Central America. It's a huge issue. And we're losing them on migratory routes. Migration is a trade-off. We're going to lose some birds through migration. However, not this many. A lot of this is happening simply because of light pollution in our windows. Now, I will keep throwing out a number because it's so deplorable. We lose 1 billion birds a year due to light pollution and window stress. Panelists are going to correct me with that number. It's worse. I want to paint a rosy picture with no room. But it's more than 1 billion birds. Half of these birds are being lost around our homes, right, and crashing into our picture windows and our patio doors. So to understand how this actually works, we're reaching up into the layers of air that the birds need to have to migrate in. Think of birds, think of the air's habitat. So we have this flow, and then we've had these spiking beacons that come up. This is for monuments, it's for air traffic. And this is where the problem is. On one hand, the birds, already to get back to some numbers, we have 722 species in North America. 60% of migrated China. We have a few, most of our hawks that will migrate during the day. So this is some of the current that we face. This one building can cause a major problem for birds in an area. Within 1 week in 2017, nearly 400 passerines, which are the warblers and sparrows, on the province, they were caught in floodlights on the 3-story Texas skyscraper. It's detailed view of the collision. So the mechanism for this, the birds can mistake lights as stars and disorient. They can be drawn in by these huge floodlights and become disoriented, fly in circles, and can crash into the building then. Because we talked about Evans Hall and how in the morning there are bird carcasses that will litter the sidewalk. Also, one of the mechanisms that happen is that they will come down into our areas exhausted, and they need to refuel, they need to rest. So they'll come down in places where they shouldn't be, our parks, our landscape office buildings, even our yards. And as they try to fuel up and rest, the fly to get from one place to another. So that's the picture window. That looks like a beautiful tree or a vegetation, and they'll fly into it. They do not know what glass is. We do not know what glass is. If a human runs into a glass window, it's common. For a bird, it's lethal. So again, 722 species in North America, 76% migrate, 80% of those migrate at night. We were all shocked by this article that came out in Science Journal in 2019. We have lost 3 billion birds in North America since then. You know, so that means the population has dropped by 3 billion birds. Here again, we lose 1 billion per year. So we're not gaining these birds back during the breeding season. So our populations are declining, and we're looking at extinctions of a lot of the bird species by mid-century. So I'd like to say that I've been involved with COA conservation for probably 6 years now. And of all the issues that I have faced, there's existential threats, there's global warming, there's sea level rise, there's forest fragmentation, there's loss of our grassland habitats. Due to spalls, due to a lot of very complicated factors that is hard for us to battle. But if it comes to this, it's just a matter of shutting off your lights, making better choices for your windows, treatment. We could save 1 billion birds. That's really an easy grab. I want to move through this real quickly because then we can speak more about this. This is Evans Hall. I would have to say this is the birthplace of our movement because she was responsible for first notifying, sounding the alarm of the birds that are dying because of this glass building. They did do some mitigation. We will talk about that, which has helped tremendously. So here's more trying to go through it. But one thing I do want to say is the staff at this building, the custodial staff, maintenance staff, they were supportive before the efforts to clean up the carcasses, which is very important. A lot of corporations will have their maintenance staff get out there first thing in the morning and clean these things up so nobody can see the carnage. There's no problem if you can't see it, right? So they were working with them. So here is the easy ask that we're asking for people, is to shut off your lights from April 1st to May 31st, shut them off between 11 and 7, and then again in the fall, from August 15th to November 15th. This is a very easy thing to do, but some will argue it doesn't go far enough, simply because light pollution has its effect on other animals, it has its effect on humans. The AMA has reported that there are increases because of these very bright LED blue lights, that we are losing our sleep. We have cognitive issues, we have endocrine cancer issues, we have stress, we have insomnia. This light pollution is bad for us. So shutting off the lights, this is a building in Chicago. They shut off 50% of their lights, and they found that they experienced a 60% decrease in bird mortality. Good numbers. Imagine what they would have if they shut up all of their lights. This is a slide from Audubon, National Audubon. That this is the World Trade Center beacon. They're not going to shut that off. You know, 9/11 occurred during peak migration. It's a national monument, you know, a tragedy, it's in our heritage. But what we did find is that if they were to shut these beacons off for 20 or 30 minutes, that the birds would reorient and continue to fly on their migratory route. Instead of spiraling in a circle, crashing into windows, just crashing out the sky and exhaustion. We will also talk about tonight House Bill 6607, which is a bill that is created out of the Environmental Committee in the Connecticut General Assembly. We have a lot of people in this room. This bill will require the state-owned and leased buildings to shut their lights off in that period that I had mentioned. So this is a step in the right direction. It gives us something to point to. Connecticut is being leader on this. Furthermore, when they replace buildings, if they new buildings, they're going to follow the International Dark Sky Association guidelines on rating, and I believe also on space. Real quick, the agency, the American Bird Conservancy, I have one of their handouts in the back. There are ways for you, for your own home, make your windows bird friendly. Please join Lights Out Connecticut. There's a plate sheet back there in the cards. And I'll go through it because I'm running out of time. And at this point, we'll call our network.
All right, and so we're just gonna solve some tech issues quickly so we can use the microphones, since we just bought them, they should be working. So talk amongst yourself.
I think about a slide. Okay. Yes. Lights out. These guidelines are coming from the American Bird Conservancy Group, and coming from National Audubon. Birds are taking off in their full flight from really at about 11 o'clock. Of course, the more or less light, the better. So if we could shut your lights off all night long, discuss down shielding and better light options for the ground and what we could discuss it. I apologize. This is something we take all night to talk about. We are limited on time.
So the mic should be working. Maybe microphones.
Is it possible to turn the volume down?
Yeah, let's figure it out. Let's play it by ear. Turn them off for right now. Let's play it.
Hi. So we have a panel. We will ask some questions of them to get the ball rolling, and then turn it over to whatever questions I can have, if that's okay. I would like to first ask Leo about the new LED lights. They look more white than older street lights, not look yellow. Why do the new LED lights cause an increase in light pollution?
What happens is this. LED lights emit a lot of short wavelength light. They call that blue light. And if you remember when headlights first came out for LED, you're driving down the road. Remember how your eye would sort of squint when the car coming the other way was showing you those blue headlights? That's because of the short wavelength. The problem with the short wavelength is that short wavelength will bounce off an air particulate and come back down as light pollution much more frequently than a long, say, red wavelength light will. And if you go back to the 1970s and 1980s, we had high pressure sodium streetlights. Well, they looked kind of orange. They really didn't look white. And that's because of the red wavelength. And it's the blue wavelength from the LED that causes the problem. Now, the industry has recognized this to some degree. And now they are able to coat with the phosphor coating the LEDs, and the degree of thickness that they use determines how much blue light still gets out. They use terms like 2700 K for correlated color temperature. The high pressure sodium used to be 2200 K. The ones that came out originally with LED were 6000. Lots and lots and lots of blue wavelength. So you can specify as a town, if you're ordering, or even a parking lot, you could order your light with what we'll call low level blue wavelength light. And it doesn't cost any more money. The industry doesn't say if you want to do that, it's going to cost you 10% more or something like that. Same price. All you have to do is specify.
Thank you. This is a question for Rebecca. You've gathered data on the Yale campus in New Haven on bird window collisions. What have you found? How was this research conducted and by whom? And what is Yale doing to address collisions?
Well, as Craig showed the image of the Yale School of Management, that's where my interest in this issue began as a student. And as you can see, the building is basically shaped like a giant apple door with a courtyard in the middle. So it has all of the elements of, if you were to design a building, to be dangerous for birds, all going on across there, it's quite a large scale. And we began to gather in partnership with the custodial staff. The building very conveniently located right across the street from the Peabody Museum of Natural History at Yale, where the ornithologists and the ornithology team there has been an immense asset and help. And so we convinced the custodians at the school and the facility managers to, rather than throw the birds away, put them in bags, a little map, and mark where they found it and carry it across the street. And then it soon became clear that we were talking about hundreds of birds a year from a single building. And I wish I could say that, that's the only building on Yale's campus. It's a big problem, but then lo and behold, as we've expanded our initiative in recent years with support from the University Sustainability Office, facility team, and so forth, we've discovered that there are actually probably a dozen buildings that are having nearly an equivalent scale impact. Many at, for those of you who are familiar, at Yale's West Campus, the former pharmaceutical campus in West Haven, where, for instance, this past fall, we had 82 juncos all at once on a single day flying to the glass walkway bridge. And then, we found collected. And so we found over the course of the study originally was ad hoc and focused primarily on that one building. This past fall, for the first time, we did a systematic survey with about 10 Yale undergrads. Turns out the Yale undergrads are really eager to go around and look for dead birds. What we found out in posting the job. And did a sort of much more systematic look at about 40 different buildings on the campus. And now our database of birds killed over the last roughly 5 years at Yale, with a bias towards the most recent years, is about 1,600 birds, over 70 species, including some rare species like Pequot thrushes, which was the first Pequot thrush added to the Peabody Museum's collection in 50 years or something around that timeline. And so in response to this, I'm happy to report we were optimistic, but not confident that this data was actually going to be translated into concrete improvements for the birds. But in some cases it has. Unfortunately, at this building, they've installed a pilot. It's a tiny little pilot, and I think there's some uphill battle there to be fought still. But at some of the less prominent buildings, Yale has started installing feather-friendly window film and other retrofit improvements. And then we're working with the university to implement a design requirement for all new buildings. To meet much more rigorous bird friendly standards, which I hope will make a difference as well as the expansion of certain buildings.
Great, thank you. Now I have a question that is for a superhero. This is for Meredith, because this seems so perfect. There's so many homes and businesses in our state. How do we convince enough people to turn off their lights at the same time to make a difference for birds? Is it possible? Are there any examples of other cities or states that have managed to do this?
Yeah, it's good to think about that. As much as we want to say, do what you can and know that it makes a difference collectively. There are some places around the country that have community-wide concerted efforts to dim lights, and it is having an effect. Just a few weeks ago, I didn't go, but a classmate of mine came back from Florida, where they're turning off lights to help the sea turtles. So that's a concerted effort where they're completely dimming all the lights and making a difference. It's not just birds, as we know from the studies that the light pollution affects all different kinds of breeding cycles, migration, nesting, and different things. So in St. Augustine, Florida, they're dimming the lights completely. She said that she saw for sea turtles. I know in Jackson Hole, they're also dimming the lights, and that's concerted where they choose certain days where they turn them all off, and you can see a marked difference. The thing is that you have that kind of tipping scale where you can say enough is happening where we're not going to have quite as much sky flow, but from the data that Craig shared earlier is that one building, that is a high collision building, if it turns off half the light, and it reduces the collision, then we know that even one building, so you can feel confident that if you turn off the light, that you can make a difference in one building. So it's kind of nice in a way with this type of pollution, that light pollution is, that you can have a market effect just on your own, but then you can also be part of a larger collective effort. And so the dream is to one day have this time period will be market decrease in the sky globe. But for now, we're all, doing our part and seeing if we can do part by part, maybe community by community, until we can make a change for the members.
Thank you. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Leo, what steps can a municipality take to reduce unnecessary light pollution from streetlights?
One of the interesting things about streetlights is that most municipalities have no idea when a streetlight is really warranted, when it's not, where it should go. It's just been an accumulation of things over the years. And there is a step that they can take if they really want to address how many streetlights out there are really unwarranted. And that is to come up with a master streetlight plan. And we have a template that would be an excellent starting point. But what the town does is they appoint a committee. The committee then makes determinations. For example, do you need a streetlight at an intersection? Do you need it at a crosswalk? Do you need it at a firehouse entrance? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you need a streetlight? And what they do is they then come up with a list of all those places where a streetlight is warranted. And then they go back and they do an audit. And they take all the streetlights that don't meet any of the criteria and they check them off as due for consideration for removal. And I would say that probably, and sounds a little radical, but maybe 85% of streetlights that are not located on interstate highways, but the ones that are on regular roads, are totally, absolutely, without any contribution to public safety. They're just there. And probably the biggest obstacle is fear of darkness, where people want a street light there because it makes them feel safe. And you could come back and prove to them statistically that that absolutely doesn't happen. But that doesn't take care of that feeling. And that feeling of being secure with light is probably the biggest issue. But towns can do a lot if they decide to adopt the streetlight master plan and then make a determination on which streetlights do we actually need in town for safety.
I just want to say, I don't know if it's been said yet, but the thing about Lights Out Connecticut is that, as a movement, is that each person, it's up to them to decide what is safe to turn on if they're in their property and what is not. So it's a voluntary program, and it's up to each person to do a light audit, like the one that you mentioned. It's like to take a look at what are the lights that I need and which are the lights that maybe you don't need. And so that's part of it. It's that's the first step of ethics. What's happening in my space? How can I make it, a more ethical space for myself, for nature? And so really it's about taking a closer look and then seeing what you can yourself commit to doing. So it's completely voluntary. You'll be doing checks. If you say you're doing lights out because you turn off 3 lights, that's fantastic. If you do more, whatever you think is safe in the property, and whatever the community agrees is safe for them, that's enough for lights out. It's not about turning off all lights because that's not safe. It's really about doing like Leo's suggesting about how you take a look, you do the audit, and then you see what is safe to do and what do we need, and what is non-essential. It's really about like trying to figure out what is non-essential, figure damn something on.
Also, you could downshield lights. Please go to the International Bar Tire Association website. There's a lot of good tips on how to shield your lights so it's not shining in a big orb like down where it's needed. Tech birds. You need to address both light pollution and building design. How does building design contribute to bird collisions, and what can be done to fix the problem?
Well, as Craig showed in his introduction, the birds are often drawn in and disoriented by these lights, and then they land in places like New Haven and Southport and so forth. And then when they're foraging and resting and so forth the next day, end up flying into glass and highly reflective, of other materials on buildings. And so basically, if a human can, what the humans can see, the birds can see. And so what's recommended now is the sort of standard is what they call a 2x4 rule, which is 2 inches tall, 4 inches wide. And if there's a pattern on a window that meets that, whether it be dots in that pattern, lines, etc., that's sufficient to deter those birds. It sort of sacrifices the hummingbirds, I think, because the hummingbirds will fly through a smaller place than that, but it will protect, it will allow those birds to observe that as a surface as opposed to seeing it just a transparent reflection or seeing through it to greenery on the other side. So most of the retrofitting solutions involve patterns, so putting a pattern on the glass. Some of these are permanent or last, like the ones that y'all have installed, buildings will last 10, 15 years when they're installed. And then others can be seasonal, and just people put tempera paint on the outside of buildings. They put even things like if you have a window screen on the outside of the window, that is sufficient to prevent the collisions. They hang ropes or strings on the outside during the collision. The Yale School management people laughed at me when I suggested that. Absolutely not. But nonetheless, it's effective and would be worthwhile. So the whole range, and American Bird Conservancy maintains a database both of professional products and sort of DIY solutions on their website that's quite robust and ever growing.
There's also a handout from the American Bird Conservancy on what you can do for your own windows in fact. Great. Meredith. 2021, you and 2 classmates convinced the Yale Divinity School to participate in Lights Out. What was that process like? What motivated you to advocate for Yale Divinity School to do this on campus? What about other different schools on the university?
Yeah, so I'm a Yale Divinity School student, should be graduating in May. So when I arrived, my first year was on Zoom during the pandemic. When I arrived on campus in August of 2021, is around the time of the Meteor Towers, and that's a special, site for me. So I went out to try to see some of the meteor, and I could not find like any stretch of darkness anywhere on my residential campus. So we're on a part of Yale where it's our administrative and classrooms are with, the Yale department. And so I actually got in my car and started to drive to try to find a dark place. Now I grew up in Vermont, we're both Vermonters, and so we were, so I went out to try to find some dark spots, and I could not. I was living, New Haven, and I was kind of surprised at how much light pollution there was. It was really shocking to me, and I could not, no matter how far I drove, trying to find a patch of green space to find a dark sky. So when I came back to my campus, I was looking around and seeing so many lights coming, little walkway lights, so many lights in the interior of our quad building, completely illuminated at 11:30 p.m. And so I took photos of it and sent it to my dean, Dean Greg Sterling, and said, "Look at the building at night. I think we can do something about this." And he immediately. That was the amazing thing, was that Dean Sterling was completely on board, had a personal experience as a young person of hearing the geese caught in the lights of his town encircling. So he was extremely empathetic to the bird and said, "Let's do it." So, but of course, the first question is how can we do it safely? And then there was also a question of like the technology, because I told the campus right now it's from the 1960s. So there was a technological, issues that made it difficult to do like everything that we involved to. But he consulted with the facility people, and they figured out what they could do, which was to do the back garden, to turn those off during vibration, and also to make sure that the lights in the main quad, which is a large building, maybe 2 or 3 times as large as Pequot Library, that those lights are dimmed after 11 p.m. So we hired a light monitor to go and turn off the lights. And we had a ceremony. We had the bird migration mass outside, and it was perfectly timed because when we started with the 6 o'clock, and in the middle of it, all the lights for the garden popped on, and it was like daylight right there. And so it's a little bit of a shame moment where you can see like, do we really need all this? No one's usually here. So, so each year we're trying to get a little bit better, and then we're going to install some lights, some mechanized lights in the quad this spring. But it's an ongoing process. It's not just like you make it, like you're trying to continually look at it and say, what more can I do? Is this enough? How am I feeling about this? So, we'll see this spring, we'll continue on it.
It's a great campus.
Yeah.
So the Yale Bird Friendly Building Initiative is conducting research on bird friendly building policy in U.S. cities. Are cities implementing bird friendly building policies? How effective are they?
They are, and I'll have Meredith speak to this too. We've been working on this research together. But over the last basically 13, 14 years, about a dozen, a little bit more than that, cities across the US have started implementing bird-friendly building requirements that apply to a differing range of buildings. Some are quite wide-ranging. New York City's law is really the gold standard of what this would look like. It applies to all the bureaus, all new buildings, all major retrofits. They don't have none of the laws, including New York City, apply retroactively to existing buildings. But nonetheless, given the scale of construction that's ever occurring and evolving in the cities, it's quite significant. So we now see from San Francisco, Meredith's gone deep onto many of these in case studies, cities like Cupertino and New York and many more. A real movement, I think, of cities taking the lead in the absence of state or federal or other action on this to require bird-friendly materials, which is then having an effect on really, I think, encouraging the market. So all sorts of glass manufacturers just in the last few years have started coming out with bird-friendly signs on their websites specifying that this meets New York City's and all these other cities' requirements. Some of the best explanations actually right now in the absence of other reports that delve into this in depth of what these laws require are extremely clear explanations. I think on the glass manufacturer's website themselves, they're the ones that have gone into it and are producing it. So I think that's tremendously exciting. There's no city in Connecticut that's done this. We have a state building code which complicates things. There have been some cities in other states where there's a state building code that tried to do it through zoning, which could potentially be done here as well. Madison, Wisconsin, most significantly did this and had some pushback from a conservative development group in response to that, which I think put the brakes on my attempts to, it doesn't cold feet attempts to try to get New Haven to be the first one to take that on. But I think it'd be tremendously exciting, and it's possible that either cities or at the state level in Connecticut we could see bird-friendly building policies put to effect. Do they need to add to this? Meredith has been taking the lead on much of this research too.
But I believe that you talk a little bit more about how to.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about it?
No, it's a question for you.
Okay.
Just to add on, I'm involved with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There's a program called Urban Bird Treaty Program. It's 30 cities in the United States that have met these requirements. 2 of them are here in Connecticut. It's Hartford and it's New Haven. So there is they are due for to file some reports, and part of that is bird hazard mitigation. So this means lights out, means proper windows, etc. So hopefully we're going to see New Haven and Hartford coming on board. So that's our segue into HB 6607. That's going to require the state buildings to become compliant. So can you please talk about this and how this compares to other laws in the country?
Sure. So House Bill 607 would require all state-owned and state-leased buildings in our state to turn off lights. Actually, the dates that they set for start and end times for the spring and fall season are very good. They're covering all the different times when we would recommend. And also from 11 to 6, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., which is kind of the standard lights out time. We are pretty hopeful. It passed unanimously out of the Environment Committee on Friday at 5 p.m. So that was a real positive celebration. And so we go on, and we're just waiting to see. Viveca knows from our research that like these bird-friendly building laws, the different cities will attach like a fiscal cost to that. And we've seen, at least in our research, we've looked at that it has no fiscal cost each time. Bird-friendly building requirements, no fiscal cost. In New York City, in Cupertino, in Madison, and Arlington, And so, we're waiting to find out what Connecticut state will say about this law. Will it have a cost for the state? And it's a little bit counterintuitive when you think, oh, dimming lights will save on energy, but there's also some cost of like installing the technologies that, that we don't think about. So we'll have to see, but if it comes out as, cost neutral, which is very possible, because that's kind of the standard for friendly, then this could very well, be easily passed in the House and on the Senate. So I'm hoping we would only be, I think, the third or fourth state in the country to have a lights out, and it would be adjacent to New York State, which has one. And so we would be creating a 50,000 square mile corridor for birds where there is a lights out law in the land to help them support their migration patterns. So that would be really great to be able to pair up with New York State and Connecticut State. It would set a really great precedent, and hopefully the rest of the region can go.
So please reach out to your representative and your senators, and push them on this. We've talked a lot about birds. We have mentioned bats, we have mentioned moths, but what about fish? How does light pollution affect salmon migration? Yeah.
What's very interesting is that light pollution affects all kinds of animals, and it has to do with predators, where in darkness, maybe the animal's not going to be seen, but in light, maybe the predator can see them. And so what happens with salmon migration, as salmon migrate up the river, once they come to a bridge that has all kinds of lights on it, instead of just meandering through and continuing on to where they're headed, they stop. And the reason they stop is because they have an instinctive fear that putting themselves into the light will expose them to an eagle or some other predator that might come down and snatch them. So it's very interesting how light pollution affects all kinds of butterflies, insects, animals, fish, and us. But it's just something that most of us never really stopped to think about. When we were little kids, we were outside playing around and the lights were on. And one thing you can tell now, you look outside and think of what it was like, for those of you that can remember 50 years ago, what it was like outside with lightning bugs at night in June and July, right? They were all over the place. Find them now. They're not very few. It's just that they're not there.
Yeah, there's a Walmart where outside used to be. Well, I have you. Can you recommend a good book?
If anybody's really interested, there is a phenomenal book. It's called The Ecological Consequences of Artificial Light at Night. It's on the academic side, but it is tremendous in terms of research and depth and so forth and so on, and covers everything in the way of insects and the butterflies and the animals and us. Craig mentioned earlier about the American Medical Association. They actually came out with 2 papers, one in 2009 that recommended fully shielding all outdoor lighting to restrict light pollution. And then in 2016, they came out focused on LED lights and the need to contain LED lighting at 2200 Kelvin rather than 6,000 and so forth, and how it has an effect on human health.
So, question for the panel, and then we'll open it up to your questions. Why should we care about migratory birds?
Does anyone in the audience have an answer for that? They are cute. Any other possible?
No, I mean, I think my answer, we would be so tremendously impoverished if we don't, we're impoverished by the loss of those birds, and be so impoverished in so many ways, in all sorts of ways that I think are easily not counted. And there's obviously the wonder and the joy and the delight and so forth that they bring in ways that are immeasurable, but also just the trillions of dollars of economic activity. We're talking about seed dispersal and pollination and helping, and it's all sorts of ways our ecology function and thrive, and that we'd be devastated without them in all sorts of ways. I think we're only beginning to grasp. And they're cute. That's what I said.
Charismatic is an adjective that describes a person I often shut up. Charismatic.
There's also a study done in Germany showing that when the birds are singing, the stress level of the humans that live nearby is lowered very much. And think about that. If you are a prehistoric person and you're running through the woods or just hanging out, and the birds are singing, there's probably no predator. Once they stop and fly away, you're probably gonna get eaten.
Yeah, there's actually a word for that. It's called biophilia. And it's a type of green building design. It's actually what helped convince the county of Arlington, weirdly, what we think of as Arlington, Virginia, is actually but anyway, what helped convince them to do bird friendly building is the concept of biophilia, which kind of took hold in the leadership there. And that's the idea that we love, as humans, we evolve alongside with nature, nature's sound. We love bird song, we love the sound of trickling water. We like to use certain colors. We like natural materials. If they don't like layer of glass, even though we see a lot of it, it raises our stress level. And so, built into our DNA, built into our humanness, is a love for all of these things and our own well-being, physical and also spiritual and emotional.
So, do you have any questions for the panel?
Because so we're all here, we're a little sensitive to it, kind of about meeting each other. We have these all the time, they're coordinating, they're all like a family. So then I started meeting and feedback, so I'm coming around our neighbors. But how do you get this word out? And why not for any suburbs here? Dark and hot. That's really, that's not, right? We don't. How is there lights out in New Jersey and lights out in Ohio?
There's a lights out in Boston, but one of the things that we have in Connecticut is a state building code requirement that went into effect in 2004. It deals only with commercial buildings, but it says that if you're a commercial building, and we're talking about parking lot lighting or other similar types of bright lights, they all have to be fully shielded. Yeah.
It's not shielded above.
That's
Shielded
right.
from above.
Yeah. Or even if it was attached to the building, right? The bottom line is that you can't have the light shine out like this, it has to go straight down. And the building code enforcement, it takes place usually by zoning enforcement officers in a town who have 38 balls in the air already, and you're coming into them saying, hey, what about this over here? And they know it take a lot of work to get that straightened out, but nonetheless, with that building code amendment, you can actually go and look at it online, but if you have that and you see a violation and you file a complaint, it's just one more step in the right direction. When we talk about how we can address these different issues, residential is going to be the last issue. But right now we could go for commercial, which is basically everything except residential. Even apartment buildings that have, more than 3 stories or something like that are classified as commercial. So working with the local building official or zoning enforcement officer to raise awareness that the issue is there, it helps.
So, Leo, I learned my stealth tactic in America. So I drove around Fairfield, checking out the various railroad lamps that were, aimed down. And one thing I saw was all the commercial parking lots had these big arc lights, lighting up. Can we make it easy for them to comply? Is there an aftermarket shield that's available to put on these lights? Because the lights look like they're all the same. Everybody seems to be using the exact same model light. And that seems to me to be the biggest, the biggest polluter in Fairfield, there's always one that are aiming down on the parking lot. Aside from the whole food parking lot, where they're waiting for the fire sausage plan, there's a line. The code is on the LED, but
One of the things that's interesting here is there are some lights that have an ability to tilt, right? Well, they have to be tilted down. But when you go around and you look at lights, to say, well, is it in violation or not? In 2004, they didn't have LED lights. They weren't yet available in the commercial market. So if you see an LED light out there that's like this, you know that's a violation. And what should have happened would be at the time that the merchant decided that they were gonna put in that new LED light to replace the old one, they should have filed a lighting plan with the town, and they should have done it right. And if they didn't, it's on them. And whether or not the town wants to get involved in it is another question, but raising those issues helps. Because if enough people do it, then the town will do something about it.
And also from a residential standpoint, Home Depot's got a good selection of dark skies compliant lighting that it aims down and can be on the front porch and on the back. And I believe they're gonna put a display out. They're going to do their shift right now to the spring, but I've been in touch with them, and they're talking about putting out a display of their dark skies compliant lighting.
Lowe's has done that in the past. Home Depot actually had one of their vice presidents join the International Sky Association Board of Directors for about 4 years to show interest in terms of them being a good neighbor. We call it good neighbor lighting.
I would say that, I will add to that, the problem of the neighbors who trying to light, really definitely a problem because, like we see, for instance, California, where they have a law. I was told by the city officials that when they had the hearings, or when they would have a public event, at least half the people there weren't there for birds. But that's the thing about Lights Out, is that it appeals to people for all different reasons. Like some people might want Lights Out because they have a neighborhood who loves color. And that's great. Like that's our coalition of like saying, look, the light pollution is a problem. But like that kind of frustration and the thing that will convince people to set these kind of ordinances or pass local laws would be that kind of frustration and being like or as a possible as a mechanism. So I think that kind of being neighbor is an important piece of actually getting legislation and getting policy. So it's just enough and like so like actually, it's like the next step of that. We're trying to do in Fairfield seems to be a spot that things are happening thanks to thanks to people who are raising this issue here, is that Fairfield sounds like could be building up towards a moment when you can try to do something more.
Charlie, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Can we keep going?
Yeah, but I'm actually gonna interrupt quickly because we're getting some questions from the online streamers. So there's a question from a Pearson Probst in Brooklyn. Are there any other things we can do to support migratory bird populations aside from lowering light pollution? Take it away.
So the question was, supporting migratory birds in addition to?
In addition to Lights Out. So what's something else that humanity can do to support this cause?
Okay, I'll take that. Here again, I have been on the Connecticut Ornithological Association Board as conservation chair for 6 years now, and this is dear to my heart. The National Audubon Society has a program called the Important Bird Area IDA program. This is where birds are either going to migrate from, or migrate through. So there are a lot in Connecticut, there's a lot in New York. So support that organization, support the National Wildlife Refuges, because these properties by the government have been set up. It's severely underfunded by quite a bit. And even get on your local land trust. You could have a 12-acre lot in your town that could be important habitat for bird during migration. Good question. In the back.
Yeah, I was just curious, with the green initiatives, with the lead, with buildings and, sustainability. I'm going to be careful on what to say there in my city. 9/10 mile, we have 113 LED lights, 140 feet. Yeah, that's the parapet, the nesting working craft, monitoring fiber, investing area. But with the green initiative, why don't cities look at this and say, like, what's a carbon? All the talk, but it would be one of the things that.
Yeah, amen. I agree. And I think, you know, I'll let Leo speak to the cost of the lighting. That's not something that I'm an expert in. But I think the lead issue has been interesting to study in the context certainly of Yale and of the research that Meredith and I have been doing. Because, you know, as many of you probably know, the LEED system, you become a LEED certified building by gathering up points in different categories, but there aren't requirements there. So the Yale School of Management, many of Yale's worst buildings, for example, this happens across the board. You know, the new modern buildings are the ones that are getting LEED certified. They tend to be the glass boxes. So our worst buildings, you know, all over the website, all over the LEED website are gold certified, platinum certified LEED buildings that are then completely unsustainable for local wildlife simultaneously. So I think this is a problem. I don't have an answer for you on the cost, so I'll refer to you here on that. But I think it's a big problem in terms of getting people to reorient and understanding of just doing, you know, whatever the carbon accounting or the materials and so forth is insufficient to ensure it's a truly sustainable building. In some ways, I think those certifications are getting a pass on these critical issues for wildlife.
Note on cost is sort of really kind of weird. Here, your LED lights are now pretty comparable in cost to what the old lights used to cost. And they take up so much less energy. You would think that people would be just absolutely grateful for that and they would be happy to save all that money. Instead, they put in brighter lights and they put in more lights to the point that there's more light pollution today from LED lights than there were from the light pollution from all the old lights. It's just what's happened and how you go about fixing that is very difficult. But basically, if this is going to cost less, I want more.
I will say, I just want to say one more thing about that. Actually, two more things. First is that last year, Governor Vermont signed, you know, a commitment that they're trying to get to net zero. I think it's by 2040. And the question becomes, like, linked to your question is, how will we get to net zero decarbonization? It's not just about having clean energy, it's also about reducing our energy use. Because, I mean, we have to do both in order to meet these very strict net zero decarbonization goals. So there's that, but there's also the reality that energy costs in Connecticut, we're one of the 5 most expensive states in the country for energy. So when we start talking about how is it that people can just illuminate things unnecessarily, how do you have the money when we know it's so expensive in the state just to illuminate, you know, for no reason, for no purpose, sometimes to causing harm. So it's like all these things should go tandem. And that's one of the things that keeps happening over and over again. And I think with like the green movement, sustainability is that not only do we currently have all the solutions, that's the frustrating part. We already know what we need to do. It's just a matter of can we do it? Do we have the will to do it all? But also because it's nonsensical what we are doing. So it's like every possible argument that you can have for we've got the solutions, we have the money, in most cases we find money, we have a budget surplus in the state. It's just a matter of I guess convincing people or changing people's hearts to it. So I think that's what it is like breaking out of common sense. What we think is common sense is actually not at all. And it's like it will really take attitude shift. Yeah, changing people's personality.
In fact,
So the question from Leo, and you go to your concept streetlight. And, that it's, safety hazard. Really not an issue. And if you were, assuming like you got a safety hazard to. Now, what about safety hazard for pedestrians and cyclists? We all want everybody to walk more, we want to cycle more, we want cars, we want to take public transportation. As you know, in Connecticut, it's 75, cycle has last year. So how are these concepts, how are they in conflict? How would you address that in your model?
If you have an active night light, you're downtown Middletown, for example, you need those lights on until the night light stops. I used to live over on Mapleton Avenue in Suffield, and we had a new road put in with 17 new houses. And the street lights are on all night long, but the sidewalks roll up at 8 o'clock at night. No one's out there walking, but the lights are still on. So you have to differentiate, where do you really need them? Like for that pedestrian activity? Okay. But where you don't have pedestrian activity, what then? And so taking a look at what you need and where you need it is part of what would be that master plan that you would come up with if you were a municipality, a streetlight master plan that says, okay, here's what we need, when we need it. And if you were Middletown, you would say that downtown commercial strip, definitely we need the lights on all the time. But if you're talking about the side street that went in next to our house, you don't need those street lights. You don't need them at all anyhow. But even if you wanted to leave them on, why leave them on past 8 o'clock at night when no one's out there walking in darkness? So that it's not an all or nothing. It's a matter of taking a careful look at what you need and when you need it. And then taking a look at your inventory and saying, does this serve one of those purposes? If it does, then we keep it. But if it doesn't, then we take it out.
Charlie, you have a question?
I think we're gonna wrap it up. You guys want one more question, or I think we're all set on
Is
We're gonna one more question and then
Okay, one more question.
How much of this issue is that we have individual lights on and maybe don't have light on a lot of the windows? Is that an issue?
Yes, it is an issue. If it's shining outside, the birds could be bothered by it. So if you're not using lights, shut them off, or during the migration, there's using shades or whatever to stop that, with the lights off.
Right, so, and we're gonna do one more from Mary, because she helped organize all of this and whatever we say.
I just wanted to make everyone know, this is a kickoff to your question, how do we get to the rental?
Yeah.
So this is our kickoff, this is the beginning, and we hope it will help us continue. On April, well, say March 26th, the Audubon is screening the seasonally osprey, and we'll be having another conversation about this. On April 5th, after land trust, we have an Emily May on the personal site talking about politics. So we're going to be continuing to do this. We're talking to the town planning and zoning. If you're in Fairfield, we're reviewing our plan of conservation and development, which is a very important document of the every 10 years. This kind of thing to be included in that. So we're working with the zoning people, and we always be helping you with that as well. And so we really need you to, help sign on. We changed our Fairfield Pollinator Pathway Pledge to include Lights Out as well. So we're working with that organization to push that out throughout all the the country. So we are working on it, and we need your help to get the word.
And anyone of those who knows that they can't stop from getting the word out. I'll put it there now, go to our website, Lights Out Connecticut, and you can pledge, you'll get on a mailing list, and we don't want to do a rest of everything that's happening because this political landscape changing quickly. So,
All right. You guys, can I see a big round of applause? They were traveling not just locally, but all throughout the state. We have video coming from Suffield, we have people from New Haven and all around the state. And they took precious time out of their day to do this. So we're eternally grateful. And I'm just gonna make one last second plug some Pequot events. So if you are enjoying adult programming like this, we're an association library. We are not a public library. We rely on donations and support from patrons such as yourself. So just in the next couple of months, if the Pequot library pops up in your brain, please feel free to donate. We have multiple site pages dedicated to this. We also have some very important programs coming up later this month. On March 9th, Thursday, we have words and ideas of Noah Webster. So this is going to be with Joshua Kendall. He is an award-winning New York Times bestselling author who is kind of like the definitive expert on Noah Webster. He will be completing a panel discussion here with representatives from the Noah Webster House in West Hartford, Connecticut. Then on March 15th, we have Wes Haynes, who is the executive director of the Meredith Barges Conservancy, coming here to celebrate the Pequot Library's birthday. So I think I said this before, but we were founded in 1894. I do not want to do the math in regards to which birthday it is, but it's a big one, right? So he's going to be talking about the library's history of the area. I think we don't want to do that. And then finally, this is my last event. We have representatives coming from two prestigious academic libraries in Massachusetts to talk about the New England Primer. And so this is in relation to our new exhibit, Bedtime Stories and Cautionary Tales. It's strengthening the youth literature from the Puritan era through the 19th century. And so these are two of the top experts that we in our program as well. If you're interested, we have pamphlets and literature in the back. Thank you guys so much for coming.